The tiger mother did not roar or stalk. Instead, she tapped against the cabin door. The sound felt wrong for the wild, steady, urgent, and deliberate. It cut through the screaming wind of the blizzard, scraping against the rough wood with purpose. Inside the cabin, Kofi stood completely still. Years of isolation in the high mountains had trained him well. As a ranger, he recognized every familiar sound of the wilderness, yet this one didn't belong. This wasn't the storm shaking the hinges. It was a clear request for help. Curiosity pushed against caution as Kofi stepped toward the thick wooden door. His hand paused above the latch. Outside, the storm had erased the world into white, a frozen wasteland where survival was measured in minutes. He slid the bolt free and opened the door just enough. A blast of icy air surged inside. The cold no longer mattered the instant his eyes dropped. Collapsed across the threshold lay a massive shape, striped and stiff with ice. A tiger struggled for breath, her body shaking hard enough to rattle the wooden floor. She showed no aggression, no warning. What truly froze Kofi was what she carried between her teeth. A tiger cub, scarcely larger than a domestic cat, hung motionless and silent. The mother carefully lowered the cub onto the mat by the door as the last of her strength gave out. A quiet, broken sound escaped her throat. Not a threat, but surrender. With a frost-numbed paw, she pushed the cub closer, then allowed her head to drop heavily onto the floor. She had crossed a frozen edge of death itself, driven only by the need to reach the last warmth available to her child. Kofi didn't pause to think. There was no space for fear, no moment to weigh the risk of pulling a top predator into his shelter. All he could see were two lives slipping away. He fell to his knees, lifting the cub with one arm while pulling the mother's heavy, unresponsive legs with the other, hauling them inside before slamming the door shut against the raging wind. Silence filled the cabin once more, heavy and suffocating. The mother hovered on the edge of consciousness, her breaths uneven and weak. The cub's condition was far worse, its body stone cold, a clear sign of dangerous hypothermia. Kofi's training took over. He fed the fire until the stove thundered with heat, then pulled every wool blanket within reach. He moved with urgent focus, massaging the mother's limbs to restart circulation, chipping away the ice locked into her fur. The cub, however, was slipping away. Its small chest rose only in the faintest motions. Kofi reached for a dropper and warmed milk, but the cub lacked the strength to swallow. He realized then that he had to become the source of warmth and life himself. He opened his heavy jacket and pressed the freezing cub against his chest, flesh to fur, allowing his body heat to flow into the tiny form. He remained seated on the floor beside the mother's massive head, whispering prayers to anyone who might hear. Time lost its shape as the hours slipped together. The storm continued its fury outside, while inside the cabin, something extraordinary began to unfold. The mother tiger finally shifted. Her amber eyes slowly opened, clouded with confusion. Her nostrils widened as she caught the scent of a human, and for a brief moment, her instinct for violence surfaced. Her body tightened with tension. Kofi went completely still, holding his breath as the cub remained pressed against his chest inside the jacket. She fixed her gaze on him, then her eyes shifted to the shape beneath his jacket, where her cub was hidden. She made no move toward him. No warning sound left her throat. In a moment that reshaped Kofi's view of the wild forever, she lowered her massive head and released a deep, gentle rumble. She understood what he was doing. She recognized that he stood between her cub and death. By the first light of morning, the cub finally began to move. A faint, scratchy sound rose from inside Kofi's jacket. When he lifted the cub out, it accepted the milk, eagerly lapping at the dropper. The mother watched closely, her stare intense, yet softened by a gratitude that went beyond instinct or species. Kofi offered her a piece of raw meat, holding it carefully beneath her nose. She ate directly from his hand, her coarse tongue brushing his fingers, a sign of complete trust that sent a chill through him. Still, the danger had not passed. The cub's breathing turned labored, each shallow breath carrying a faint rattle that filled Kofi with fear. Pneumonia was the only explanation. He needed outside help, and there was no time to waste. He grabbed the radio and called for the emergency rescue team, his voice strained and breaking from exhaustion. When the rescue team arrived in their heavy snow vehicles, everything inside the cabin changed. Unfamiliar faces filled the space, along with the sharp scent of antiseptic and tension. The mother tiger reacted instantly with panic. She snarled and retreated toward the corner, exposing her fangs at the veterinarian and surrounding rangers. She stood prepared to defend herself at any cost. No one was able to approach her or the cub to move them safely. That was when Kofi stepped forward. "Step back," he ordered the team. He walked directly toward the trapped predator as the others watched in shock, their hands poised over tranquilizer rifles. As Kofi drew closer, the snarl faded away. The mother tiger eased, her tense body loosening as he reached out and rested his hand gently on her head. She leaned forward, accepting his touch. She permitted only him to lift her cub and place it into the crate. She followed willingly, stepping into the transport cage because he stood there holding the door open. At the wildlife hospital, the assessments were serious, yet not without hope. The mother required fluids and intensive care for severe frost damage to her paws and ears. The cub was placed inside an oxygen enclosure and treated with strong antibiotics to clear the fluid from its lungs. Over the following weeks, the staff observed something none of them could logically explain. The mother would not eat unless Kofi was present nearby. She paced restlessly around her enclosure until he appeared, then pressed her head gently against the glass where his hand waited. This wasn't simple dependence. It was a connection shaped under the pressure of survival. At last, the day arrived when they could return to the wild. The cub had grown healthy and energetic, full of movement and life. The mother had fully recovered, her coat once again dense and shining. Yet letting them go proved to be the most difficult moment. They drove along twisting mountain roads toward the release site, a remote valley untouched by human presence. Kofi opened the crate. Cold mountain air rushed inside. The cub burst out first, tumbling through the snow with reckless energy. The mother stepped out more slowly, stopped, and inhaled deeply. She could have run, but she didn't. She turned back. She walked toward Kofi, stopped just short, and sat. For a long moment, she held his gaze. A low, soft sound left her throat. Not a challenge, but farewell. Kofi said nothing. He only gestured toward the mountains. She rose, cast one final look, then turned to her cub. Together, they disappeared into the white haze of the forest. Months later, winter returned. During a routine patrol, the ground gave way beneath Kofi's feet. He slid, fell, and pain tore through his leg. Broken. Night came fast. The cold followed. In the darkness, shapes began to move. A pack of wild dogs emerged, thin, hungry, circling. Kofi had one flare. Before he could raise it, something struck the ground between them. A tiger. The mother. The dogs hesitated. The cub, now larger and stronger, appeared beside her. The pack retreated. The tiger lay down beside Kofi, pressing her body against his, sharing warmth and standing guard, the same gift he had once given her cub. When the rescue helicopter arrived, the tigers did not flee. They waited. Only after Kofi was lifted into the air did the mother look up one last time. She did not roar. The debt was paid. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to think about what courage truly means. Share your thoughts in the comments. What's the bravest thing you've ever seen an animal do? And if you'd like to see more real stories like this, consider subscribing.